Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and GameFound over the next week. And if you are new to the channel, we do this every week, so if you want to stay up to date with all these campaigns, this is definitely the place to be. But if you want to stay even more up to date, definitely go ahead and check out Board Game Co's channel because he puts out a video at the end of each month covering the campaigns that we know about that will be launching in the following month. So if you want to know what is coming for April, he already threw up a video for that and you can go ahead and check it out. And this will give you a good idea of the type of campaigns that you can expect and look forward to. But he also provides a ton of other videos and content that dig more into the details as the campaigns are running. So if you want to know which games are right for you, he's definitely someone you'll want to check out and subscribe to if you haven't already. Before we get started, I do like to go over a few new discoveries that I just made in the past week that I think you might be excited about. And I do have a few to go over. The first is that there's going to be a new edition of Agricola coming to retail. And this is going to be called Agricola 15 because it's celebrating the 15th anniversary. And this is going to be a big box solution that's going to have an inlay for all the different components and cards, and it's going to include most of the expansions and promos that have been released for the game, but it's not going to include all of them. It will have a total of 430 cards. I'm not sure exactly what the total number of cards is for Agricola. I'm not sure anyone knows. I've heard the number 1500 thrown around, but I don't know how authentic that is. If you know exactly how many cards there are, leave a comment down below letting us know so we all know how many more expansions we need to buy in order to fill up this box. But one thing to note is that this will be including a lot of the promos that are no longer possible to get unless you're finding them on the secondhand market. But a lot of those promos that are really difficult to find, you will be able to get in this box. And that's expected to arrive for October of this year. And this will definitely be one that I'm paying attention to. And the next announcement is that there's going to be a special edition of Castles of Burgundy. And Castles of Burgundy is a super popular Euro game. And like most Euro games, it doesn't exactly have the most beautiful artwork. It's beautiful in its own way. But if you want something that's beautiful in the rest of the world's way, this is definitely one to check out because Awakened Realms is going to be taking part in the production of this one, and they do fantastic work when it comes to artwork and components and deluxeification of different games. Of course, they can go a little overboard depending on what you're looking for in a game, and shelf space is always a concern for me, and the size of this box does give me a little bit of concern with regards to that, but I'm sure it's going to be an exciting campaign, and it's a solid game, and it might be worth taking up all the extra space on your shelf if you are a big fan of the deluxeification and getting the most beautiful version of this game. And while we're on the topic of Awakened Realms, they've also just announced that they're going to be releasing the standalone expansion to their game Tainted Grail, and this is going to be called Tainted Grail Kings of Ruin, and this is going to iterate on the story continuing from where that one left off. And I do have a few issues with the original game, and these are mostly recurring issues that I've seen across a lot of Awakened Realms designs, and that's that I don't find that they put enough effort into their rulebooks, and then also I find that there's a lot of design decisions that are left in the game that add either a lot of downtime or that add a lot of fiddliness that I would rather do without. I like games that are really quick and snappy and streamlined, and I think that's really an area that they need to focus on more. They did state in here that they've learned a lot of lessons from their previous campaign, and they're making improvements and iterating on top of that. I'm really interested to see what they come up with. I'm hoping that means that this is going to be a lot more streamlined and a little bit more lightweight, but the things that I see as issues may not be issues for everyone else, and I know that this is a game that a lot of people enjoy, especially for solo play. So if this is a game that you really enjoyed or a game that you are really interested in, I think this newer version is definitely one to take a look at because I think there's going to be a lot of improvements made on the original game, but we'll just have to wait and see until that campaign launches, and we don't quite have a date yet. And that's all I have for new announcements, so let's check out the campaigns. And the first one we have is launching on April 11th, and this one's called Escape from Stalingrad Z, and this plays 1 to 3 players and takes about 20 to 40 minutes to play. And this is a cooperative game where players are trying to escape the city of Stalingrad back in World War II, but the world is also overrun with a zombie plague. Players are going to be playing as individual heroes, each with their own special ability and stats, and players are going to be going through different scenarios, making different decisions, and discovering different paths forward in order to try and progress their campaign and escape the city of Stalingrad. The decisions that players make in one scenario will continue forward in the next scenario, and players can also take different paths to different locations depending on the decisions that they make and the routes that they decide to take at the end of a given scenario. And a really neat aspect of this game, which will really streamline your experience, is that the entire campaign is provided in this campaign booklet, which is going to have one page dedicated to the map that you're exploring, and the other page is going to be dedicated dedicated to the specific scenario. So it's going to outline your initial setup for the scenario, as well as your primary and secondary objectives, any special rules that apply, as well as the different enemies that you'll encounter. The campaign's going to be offering both a standees and miniatures version of the game, which I really love to see, and players won't just be trying to escape and fight off hordes of zombies, because there's also a survival element here as well, as players will be managing their ammunition, trying to heal their wounds, trying to find and ration food amongst each other, and survive the cold weather. And if this sounds like a campaign that you are interested in, definitely go ahead and check it out, and I have links to all these campaigns in the description below. And the next campaign we have is also launching on April 11th, and this is for FarCry Beyond. And yes, this is part of the FarCry series that was previously a video game. This is going to be adding a standalone story to the game, but with a board game implementation. And this is also a campaign that I thought was going to be launching a few weeks ago, so I already did offer coverage for this. So I'll go ahead and roll that footage for you now. And this is going to be for FarCry Beyond. If you're not familiar with Far Cry, this was originally a video game, and there's been quite a lot of games in the series so far. I've played several of them, and they've all been amazing. Each one does have a very different story, but they normally have a very open world feel with a lot of exploration, and the games give a lot of tools to the players to come at different challenges with a lot of different options. This board game version is going to take place back in 1984 on an alternative history of Earth, where players are going to be involved in both a Cold War as well as a time where the Earth is being hit by a barrage of meteor showers. And this is going to present the story through a cooperative legacy campaign with several acts, and with each act having several scenes. There's going to be different options to the player on how to complete these different challenges that the acts present. And because this is a legacy game, you can expect new rules and components to make their appearance as the game moves forward, and there will be stickers that get added to the rulebook to change the way that the game plays as it evolves over time. The different decisions that the players make will change the way that the story unfolds, and players will be playing as their own individual characters with their own special abilities and player boards, which they'll further be able to customize through the use of weapons, stunts, loot, and reaction cards. Combat in this game is done with dice, and depending on the weapon that you use, you're going to be using different colored dice, because the different colors have different probabilities as well as different damage points that they can inflict. So depending on which weapon that you're using, you're going to be rolling some different dice. The player's stunts allow for some special abilities that you can take advantage of by using action points, and then the loot or reaction cards allow players to use some special items or use some special abilities, but these ones are one-time use only. A really neat aspect of this game is that the map will offer some different cover for the players to take advantage of, but this can be used against you by the enemies as well. And if you are taking advantage of cover, this will allow players to have a better vantage point and potentially take less damage in combat. The enemies do attack in the same way as the players, but they're going to be driven by AI cards, which will dictate their actions. But if a player does get taken out by an enemy, it's not the end of the world, because players can also be revived as well. Of course, this is something you still would want to avoid, because if all players are knocked down, then you lose the game. At the end of an act, players will be going up against a final boss, and once you win, you will be revealing the next portion of the story, which will be revealed in a hidden envelope. Definitely one worth checking out, especially if you are a fan of the series. And launching on April 11th, we have a really interesting game, and this one's called For Northwood. And the reason that this one is interesting is because it's actually a solo trick-taking game. And this one takes about 15 to 30 minutes to play. And the way that this game works is that players are going to be going up against a whole bunch of different opponents, and those are all outlined on the top row here. This fence in the middle dictates how many tricks that you need to win in order to defeat that opponent. So going from left to right, the left are the most easy and the right are the most difficult. And in order to win this game, there's actually two different difficulties, and the way that those work is that each of these opponents has a random card behind them, and there's 3 stars hidden across all of those cards. And in the easy mode, if you ever lose to an opponent and you reveal the card behind it to have a star, then you have lost the game. But in the hard mode, it's actually the opposite. So if you ever lose to an opponent and you reveal the card behind them and it doesn't have a star, then you're going to lose that game, which essentially makes the game harder, because the likelihood of not revealing a star is more likely than revealing a star, since there's only 3 stars out on the board. The players will be able to choose which opponent they go up against each round by putting this arrow card above that opponent, and then the trump's going to be set based on the suit that is depicted on that opponent that you are challenging. Players will then shuffle up the deck and deal themselves 8 cards, and then you're going to be trying to win tricks by flipping over a card from the remaining deck and attempting to play a card higher than that of the same suit if possible, following normal trick-taking rules. But there's another really interesting aspect aspect of this game, and that's that there is a second row underneath your opponent's row, and that is known as your allies row. And there's going to be 4 cards there, each with a special ability, and each round you're allowed to use one and only one of those abilities to help you beat the different opponents. And each time that you do beat an opponent, they're going to join you as another ally, and you'll be able to replace one of these cards with that opponent that you just beat, and each opponent comes with a unique ability as well, and you can replace one of your existing allies with that opponent's ability once you have defeated that opponent. The catch here is that when you use an opponent as an ally, they don't stay there for the rest of the game. Once you use them, they'll be exhausted and discarded into a discard pile, returning your original ally back to that spot. Definitely an interesting game here, especially if you enjoy solo games, and this is offering the base pledge for only $15. So if this is one that you're interested, definitely go ahead and check it out, and I have links in the description below. And the next campaign we have is launching on April 12th, and this is called The Last Light, and this is a competitive 4X game that plays 2 to 4 players and plays in about an hour's time, which is a really impressive feat for a 4X game. But something else that's really interesting about this game is that it's actually designed by Roy Canaday, who is one of the main contributors to the Dice Tower, and it looks like he has done some design work in the past, but this is going to be his first published game, and I always am a little bit more skeptical of first-time designers, but I think he's done an amazing job with all the work he's done. He's been designing this one for years, and I am going to be making this one my pick of the week, and not because it's Roy Canaday's design, although I do find that interesting, but I think this game's just offering a really intriguing experience, and it looks like a really solid design with a few design decisions that I am a huge fan of. And the reason this one's called The Last Light is because it takes place just before the heat death of the universe, and players are going to be competing against each other to gather up the last of the light that the universe has to offer. And the reason they are doing this is because it can be used as a type of resource in order to enable that faction to survive the eventual heat death of the universe and continue to live through the universe's rebirth. And there are a ton of different factions that players can play as, each with their own asymmetrical ability, and players will also have a bunch of different ways that they can generate light. One of the main ways of doing that is by being as close to the center of the board as possible, because the last known white dwarf star is at the center of the board, and the closer you are to that white dwarf, the more opportunities you will have to generate light and potentially win the game. And one of the reasons I made this one my pick of the week is because I really do like the way that the action selection is designed in this game, as well as the repercussions of a particular action, which I will get into in a moment. And to start the game, the board's going to be set up with a ton of different planets for players to visit, and the planets are going to be represented by these cool little marbleized miniatures. Players will each be starting on their home colony on their home planet around the outer perimeter of the board, and then players will be able to perform actions to move around the board, build different buildings, generate resources, and try to win the game. Players will each have 6 action cards, and you're going to be using these to perform your actions. And the reason that this game plays so quickly is that players will all be playing their actions simultaneously, which allows the players to be constantly moving forward and making an action every turn. And the first action is the research action, and this allows players to gain new tech cards to upgrade or modify their ships. And the second action is the construct action, and this allows players to build buildings in order to mine or perform different actions on the planets, or they can instead choose to build one of their ships. And there's 3 levels of ships that players can build, with the more expensive ones being the better ones. And the third action is the mine action. This allows the players to generate resources from the different planets that they have buildings on. And the fourth action is the trade action, which allows players to trade different resources in and convert those to other resources. And to do this, players will be using a trade card, and that has a few options listed on it that allow players to convert certain resources into other resources, or to simply just gain a resource. And players will be able to choose any 2 of those trade actions on the card, and they can even choose the same one twice. And the fifth action is the command action. This allows you to move your ships around the board, and whenever you move your ships into an undiscovered location, you're going to be flipping the exploration token that is on that location, and that always gives you a positive benefit, and players will be incentivized to explore new areas so that they get those benefits. This is where players can also engage in battle with each other, and if you move into a location that's already inhabited by an opponent player, then you'll be able to roll dice to attack that player, and the amount of dice that you get to roll and the strength of the relative ships is going to be determined by the types of ships that are in that battle. And an interesting aspect of battles in this game is that they're completely offensive, and the player that moved into that location is going to be the only one rolling dice for that battle and resolving the battle depending on the ships there and the dice that they rolled. And the last action is probably the most important one because this is the one that resets all your other cards, and this is called the refresh action. And since all your other cards are going to be exhausted, eventually you will have to play this card, although you could play it earlier if you wanted to because it also has some other benefits like healing all your ships, and it will also gain you light for buildings in the inner rings of the board. But the thing with this card is that it will unexhaust all your other cards, but then it itself will get exhausted after it does that, so you might be wondering, how do you unexhaust this card? And I really love the way that this works because it only gets unexhausted once all the other players have used the card. So you'll really want to be careful when you use that card because you don't have complete control over unexhausting it like you do with your other cards. And one other really cool thing that also gets triggered at the same time as players unexhausting the refresh action is that sections of the board are also going to get rotated, moving around the planets and changing the respective locations of the different players. And the game continues like this until a single player reaches 20 light, and then that player will win the game. And if you are interested in this game, I definitely recommend checking out the link in the description below and following along to get notified of its launch. But I also recommend checking out the Board Game Geek page and checking out the videos tab because there's already a ton of content out for this game, which is something I really would like to see more from other campaigns rather than just jumping into campaigns blindly. I really love when different publishers and designers put out content ahead of time because the more transparency these publishers have, the more opportunity we have to understand a game and decide if it's right for us. And there's already a ton of playthroughs and how to play videos for you to check that out. And the next campaign launching on April 12th is the Dark Quarter, and this is a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players that takes about 120 to 180 minutes to play, and we actually have 2 publishers working together to create and publish this game, and that is Lucky Duck Games and Van Ryder Games. And this game offers a film noir experience taking place in New Orleans back in the 1980s, and players are going to be playing as different private investigators, each with their own asymmetric abilities, and they're going to be working together to investigate a mystery, but also explore their own personal character arcs. And this game is the spiritual successor to the game Destinies, which got some pretty incredible reviews, but it is also heavily app driven, so if that is an issue for you, this may not be a game for you. But if this is one you are interested in, I definitely recommend checking out the different videos for Destinies and understanding that game, because the games do have a lot of similarities across each other, and there might be one that you prefer more than the other, or you might just want to get both of them to your collection. I don't judge, most of the time. And the way that this game works is that each player is going to be managing their own player board with 4 different skills. There's the talent skill, the combat skill, the arcane skill, and the charisma skill. And players can actually have multiple cubes on these different skill tracks, so it's not just a single number. And players will be using these to compare against different skill checks when they roll a die, because depending on the requirements of that skill check, the number of cubes that you have below that number is going to give you that many successes. Players will also be able to upgrade their characters with different items and consumables, and each of these has a QR code that you will scan into the app and will actually change the way that the story progresses, giving you a different outcome each time you play the game. But players will also change the way that the story unfolds depending on where they visit on the map, because the main board is going to have a map of New Orleans with a bunch of points of interest, and on a player's turn they'll be able to explore one of these points of interest, going to a location card associated with it and interacting with different opportunities that that card presents in conjunction with the app. Occasionally players will even run into situations where their decision is going to have a huge effect on the way that the story progresses, and these are going to be known as pivotal changes, and the app will warn you about these because they can also have a huge effect on the way that your character's personality evolves. But you'll also have to be quick on your feet because the app only gives you 45 seconds to make these pivotal decisions. But turns in this game are pretty simple, which allows the game to be quick and snappy, and there's only a few things players have to do, because at the start of your turn you're going to be refreshing 1 effort die, then you can optionally unlock an ability card, then you can optionally play an item, and then players have to visit 1 point of interest and resolve whatever effects happen there. You don't really win or lose in this game, but some outcomes are better than others or more complete than others, so the better you do, the more opportunities you have, the more you'll upgrade your different skills and abilities, the more successes you'll have, and the more of the mystery you will uncover. But no matter what, the game will always end with a grand finale, and the decisions and the outcome of those decisions will always ensure that it's a little bit different each time you play. And did I mention that this one was also our Discord pick of the week? Because it is. Also launching on April 12th, we have the Paradox Initiative, and this is the next game coming from Elf Creek Games, and this plays 1 to 4 players. It takes about 30 to 90 minutes to play, and this is also a campaign that I thought was launching a while ago, so I did already offer coverage for this one, so I will go ahead and roll that footage for you now. Paradox Initiative by Elf Creek Games, which plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 30 to 90 minutes to play. And this one's going to be our pick of the week.
Epic.
And this one's also going to be my pick of the week.
Double epic.
Elf Creek Games only has a few games, but each one has been very well received, which has been building them a track record as a trusted publisher. I've played both Atlantis Rising and Honeybuzz, and they're both very solid games with a very unique feel to them. Many of you may also know them as the publishers of Merchants of the Dark Road, which I believe is nearing fulfillment now, but it's been a very anticipated game and received a lot of positive coverage from many different reviewers. Based on what they've done, Elf Creek really seems like a company that sets a high bar for themselves in terms of quality of gameplay, as well as production quality, which honestly is a breath of fresh air. There are endless campaigns out there that boast deluxe components, minis, and incredible production, but then it's all paired with a subpar game, often without enough thought, or playtesting, or even intelligible rulebooks. My opinion is that there are a variety of different publishers that offer value in a variety of different ways. And if you just want a ton of plastic with a game slapped on it, there's publishers for that. But if you're looking for a really well-designed game that also looks good, Elf Creek is starting to prove themselves as that publisher. But in Paradox Initiative, players are mad scientists competing to claim strands of space-time from across the multiverse. You're going to be doing this to run different experiments and be known as the greatest scientist in the universe. Each player is going to be operating their own Paradox engine, but you're going to have to be careful with operating this machine. Every captured strand can have large repercussions as it sends ripples throughout existence, collapsing wormholes and preventing future generations from reaping the benefits of your experiments. And just like in Atlantis Rising, this was a re-implementation of an existing game. This game had a very similar name called Paradox, and the main mechanisms used were action points, card drafting, set collection, and then resource management, which uses a Bejeweled-like grid for each player to manipulate. It looks like the big changes made to this game have to do with streamlining the wormhole phase while also adding more options there. It also splits the scenarios into two categories of technologies and research, and then adds a new mechanism for gaining wild tokens when you flip over 3 discs of the same color. The original game also featured a lot of different artwork from different artists to give a very obvious indication of very different worlds that players will be exploring. I haven't seen any of the new artwork for this game, but it has nearly 20 artists listed on BGG, so this is likely a design choice that they stayed true to. I don't know nearly enough about this game to promise you that it's going to be good, but Elf Creek has done a really great job so far, and refining an existing game has worked well for them in the past. And if history repeats itself, this is definitely one to check out. I have links to all these campaigns in the description below, so if this one sounds interesting to you, definitely go ahead and check it out and click that button to get notified. And the next campaign launching on April 12th is Stellar Expedition, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 90 to 120 minutes to play. And if you are a fan of Star Trek, you'll definitely want to check this one out because this has players peacefully exploring the outer reaches of space on missions of discovery. Players begin the game as one of 4 unique factions, each with their own starting tile that they're going to put around a single shared tile out on the main board. As players explore out from there, you're going to be adding more and more tiles as you explore more of space, and once all the tiles run out, you simply just stop adding more tiles and you've explored all that space has to offer. Players will also each have their own player board that will allow them to track the different resources they've collected, upgrades they've earned, as well as any damage that they might have incurred. This will also allow players to track their different crew members as well as any missions that they're trying to attempt. And the game's going to play over 8 rounds, each with 4 phases, with the first phase being the production phase, where players are going to earn resources from the different planets that they occupy. The catch here is that players will actually have to go back and visit those planets if they want to collect the resources that they've generated, but if you happen to be on a planet where you generated resources, then those can go straight into your holding bay. And then there's the discover phase, where players will be adding new tiles to the board, and the different tiles can be new planets to explore, different wormholes to allow you to jump from location to location, or alternatively asteroid belts which can actually block off locations, or you can also find refueling stations to maintain your ship, or mining planetoids or ghost ships where players can gain different resources. After that, there's the sensor phase, where each player rolls 2 dice, and depending on the outcome of the dice, they can grant different resources, upgrades, or trigger special abilities that the players have, but they can also trigger an encounter card, which usually involves some amount of danger and can be detrimental to the players, but if you are able to overcome that, you will also gain some impressive rewards. And then finally, there is the command phase, and this is where most of the action takes place in the game. And this is going to allow you to move your ships around the board and also spend resources to make additional movements. But you also be able to pick up the resources from the different planets that you have a presence at and use those resources to build or upgrade embassies, which can gain you different crew members of different ranks, but also allow those planets to also generate resources in the future. And you'll also be able to buy ship upgrades from the store, and of course, you'll be able to complete missions. And in order to complete a mission, you're going to be gaining different mission cards throughout the game, and there's a few different ranks of mission cards, with the more difficult ones offering you more victory points. But in order to complete a mission, there's basically going to be a series of requirements on that card, and you'll just have to meet and spend those requirements in order to fulfill that card. And this might require you to have certain crew members of a certain rank or crew members of a certain skill set, as well as different resources or presence on different types of planets. And after the final round of the game, players are going to score points for each of their embassies, as well as each of the mission cards that they're able to complete, and the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And launching on April 12th, we have Birds of a Feather Western North America. And this plays 1 to 7 players and takes about 15 to 30 minutes to play. And this is a reimplementation of the game Birds of a Feather. This is going to add completely updated artwork, as well as revised rules for 2 and 3 player games to make them a little bit more strategic. And the new artwork in this game is going to look a little bit more like this, but I'm going to be showing some images from the previous version of this game just because they're a little bit more suited to explain how this game plays. And the way that this game does play is that players will each have this scorecard, and players are going to be trying to spot different types of birds to earn victory points, and the different birds can exist in different habitats. There's 5 habitats in total, and they're each represented by one of these different colored rows, and within each habitat there's 7 different birds. Some birds are more rare than others, earning you more victory points, and the victory points are represented by the stars under each type of bird. If you're able to spot all the birds of a specific habitat, you'll also gain a bonus of 3 victory points, which will earn you 10 victory points total for that habitat. But how do players actually spot birds? And the way that this game plays is at the start of the game, you're going to be dividing the deck evenly across all the players. Then each turn, players are going to be choosing one to reveal, and whatever bird you reveal, you automatically have spotted that bird and you can add it to your scorecard. But you'll also be spotting any birds adjacent to your card, which are also of the same habitat. So in this example here, each player played a bird of a different habitat, so each one only scored their own bird. But the interesting thing here is that birds remain in play for one more round before they're discarded, and you can see that in this image here where the birds in the center of the table are from the previous round, and players are each getting ready to flip their next bird. That didn't sound right. But what this means is that you'll always have a second chance to spot a bird before it leaves the game for good, since if you really wanted one of these adjacent birds, then you would be able to play a bird of that color in your following turn to guarantee that it gets added to your scorecard. And play continues like this until every player just has one card left in their hand, and then that triggers the end of the game, and the player with the most victory points, which you'll tally up on your scorecard, will win the game. And another thing to note with this game is that one of the birds from each habitat is a bird of prey, and the game does offer a raptor variant where if you play that card, you can actually cancel out any other birds that are of that same habitat, which eliminates the possibility of other players being able to add those to their scorecard if they haven't already. And of course, if you're interested in this campaign, I have links in the description below. And launching on April 12th, we have Table Golf Association. This plays 1 to 8 players and takes about 30 to 120 minutes to play. And this is a really interesting dexterity flicking game with a golf theme. And the way that this game works is that players will be using tiles to represent different terrain and hazards out on a golf course. The game provides instructions to create predefined golf courses and holes, but players can also piece together any tiles they want to create golf courses of their own. Players will be starting from the tee block and flicking this little ball here that's wrapped in a type of bumper, and you're going to be trying to flick that into the hole at the end of the course in the least amount of flicks. And depending on the tile that you land on, you might incur some different penalties. If you land on a fairway tile, there's no penalty and you just continue as normal, flicking the ball however you like. But if you land on the rough, you're going to have to use any finger from your non-dominant hand. And if you land in a sand trap, you're going to have to use the thumb of your non-dominant hand. Or if you land into a water tile, then the ball is going to get placed on the shore of where it landed into the water. Or if you fall on a cliff tile, then the ball is going to get placed back to where you shot from. And there's a few other types of tiles, and I'll just put them on the screen here now if you want to read them for yourself. But this is a dexterity game with some pretty straightforward rules that anyone can jump into, which is always a great plus for any game. But if you're a fan of dexterity games or just a fan of golf in general, this is definitely one to check out. Or if you're terrible at golf like me and you just want an opportunity to actually win a game, this might be the game that changes the tide. Either way, this one looks like a lot of fun, and it looks like a game that you won't take too seriously, which usually ends up in a lot of laughs. So if you're interested in this one, I have links in the description below. And the next campaign we have is launching on April 12th, and this one's called Blade Rondo, and this plays 1 to 2 players and takes just 10 to 20 minutes to play. And this is a card combat game where players are going head to head trying to take the other opponent out, and whichever player does that first is going to win the game. This is going to play very similar to a lot of other card combat games in the genre, but this one has a few distinguishable mechanisms, and the first one is the way that the cards are dealt. There's 40 key cards in the game, and each player is going to be dealt 15, and then of those 15, each player is going to choose just 7 to enter the game with. Some cards are stronger than others, but the stronger cards tend to be just single use, so you're going to have to balance your strategy with really powerful cards that you'll only get to use one time in the entire game, versus some of the more moderate cards which you'll be able to use again and again. The game offers anime-style artwork with over 100 different characters, and the campaign is going to be offering 5 different boxes, each with its own standalone version of the game. Not too much info on this one yet, but I'm sure there'll be a lot more once the campaign launches, so if you want to know more, check out the link in the description below. And launching on April 14th, we have a reprint for the Great Wall, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 120 to 180 minutes to play. And this one maybe could have sort of been a contender for the Discord pick of the week, but somehow I forgot to include it in the poll, so I guess we'll never know. But this is a Euro game with some fantastic artwork and probably some of the most beautiful miniatures that you've ever seen, and this can be played both competitively and cooperatively. And the way that this game works is that each player starts the game with a leader card, and this is going to give each player a special ability that they'll be able to use throughout the game. Throughout the game, players are going to be attacked by different brutes coming in from one side of the board, and these are going to be represented by different cards that each have a strength, as well as some different resources that can be gained, and a point value if you are able to defeat them. And in order to defeat these brutes, players are going to be trying to hold them off and slow them down by building different walls, and then attempting to fill up all the different spaces on the card by moving their soldiers there. Once all the spaces are filled up, then that card is defeated, and the player that has the most soldiers there is going to earn that card along with any resources and victory points along with it. But also each individual space on that card is going to have a resource, and the player that put a soldier out that covers that space is going to earn that resource respectively. But this is a worker placement game, so on a player's turn, they're going to be performing different actions by placing workers on different areas on the board. Some of the actions that players can perform are to gain different resources of different types, spend those resources to buy new troops such as infantry, archers, or horsemen, or gain special ability cards which will allow players to perform different effects, as well as optionally perform a special ability at an additional cost. Of course, players can also spend resources to build different walls and barricades, or perform actions to move the different soldiers to different areas on the board and attack the different brutes. But this is a game that's been getting some pretty incredible reviews. Tom Basel gave it a seal of excellence, and a ton of other reviewers gave it really great reviews as well. One gripe that I have heard about this game from the community coincides with some of the issues I see with a lot of Awakened Realms games, and that's that the rulebook is just a bit of a slog to get through. I can't really tell from the campaign page if they're adding anything new or revising anything in the game, but I really do hope that they take this as an opportunity to at least revise the rulebook a little bit to make it a little bit clearer. But reprinting a game is also a great opportunity to make any tweaks and improvements from all the feedback that you got since the game was originally released, and it's something I always like to see with reprints of new games, and I'm sure there'll be some new content added to the campaign, at least through stretch goals. It's not too clear if there's going to be anything new or any new expansions, but if you are interested in this one, or if you already do own the game, you'll definitely want to follow along to get any updates and see exactly what the campaign is going to entail when it actually launches. And the next campaign we have launches on April 15th, and this one's called Kryptik, the trading card game. And this looks like it plays 2 players like most trading card games, and the campaign is going to be offering a few different starting packs for players to get into the action. And this is a community-driven trading card game where anyone can go ahead and play it on Steam or on Tabletop Simulator, and you'll be able to submit your own ideas and additions to the game. But cards will both have a cost in resources, but also be able to generate resources, and there's a few different colors of resources that players can generate. There's a few different types of cards and a few different types of keywords, and this is going to dictate which cards can be attacked when they go into battle and some of the different effects that the cards have. And the way that this game works is that players are going to be taking turns attacking the other player, and you're going to be able to choose the cards you want to attack with, and then the opposing player can choose the cards they can defend with. And then the attacking player is going to be able to choose which order their attacking citizens are going to do damage, and players will be able to perform different spell and ability cards during the attack phase in order to modify the different outcomes of the battle. And in order to win the game, you're trying to eliminate a specific subset of your opponent's cards and then deal one final blow. The first player to do that wins the game. And those are all the campaigns I have for you this week, but don't leave yet because we have an awesome giveaway to announce, and all you have to do to enter this giveaway is leave a comment down below. You don't have to do anything else, and this is going to be for a pledge for Aldarra. This is on Kickstarter now, and Aldarra is a game that has 4X elements, but has a huge focus on combat. And the way that this game works is that players will be recruiting and building different types of ships and fight the other players again and again, and each ship is going to allow you to roll a different combination of colored dice that each have their own probabilities. So depending on the ships that you deploy, you're going to have a different subset of dice that you get to roll. That's going to dictate your probability for inflicting a ton of damage. And losing in battle is not always a terrible thing because you will be compensated for the loss that you incurred, and that will help you get back on your feet and back to what's really important, more fighting. And this is a game that just looks phenomenal. I love all the different artwork and all the different tiles, as well as the different miniatures and structures that you'll get to put out on the board. I also really love the look of the dice as well. And this giveaway is going to be for the full complete game and all unlocked stretch goals. And to enter this giveaway, just leave a comment down below and let us know what your favorite type of fighting is. For me, I've always been a huge fan of boxing, even though I don't really watch boxing matches or engage in boxing in any way. I just think it's an incredible sport with an incredible history that really challenges the endurance that our bodies are capable of. You don't have to limit your answer to the real world. You can also pull something from another game or maybe from a movie or series. And I'm already expecting a few people to say Rochambeau, so I'm just going to shake my head now. And since this one is worldwide and I'm only doing one giveaway this week, I'm not going to require any hashtag. Just leave a comment and that'll get you entered in the giveaway. And now let's go ahead and draw the winner for last week's giveaway, which was for a pledge for Darkest Doom, which you can go ahead and check out on Kickstarter right now. But to draw a winner, I use this fancy application here. All these extra names down here are bonus entries from my Patreon subscribers. If you like this sort of content, you can definitely check that out in the description below. I truly appreciate it. It helps make all these efforts just a little bit more sustainable for me, but it also gets you some bonus entries into these giveaways, which is also not a bad thing. Let's go ahead and draw the winner and see who won themselves a pledge for Darkest Doom. And the winner is Jasmine Tan, which is one of our Patreon subscribers, so congratulations, Jasmine. And I accidentally closed the tab, but we do have video evidence, so that's locked and loaded, and I will reach out to you and get that pledge all sorted out. And those are all the campaigns I have for you this week. Definitely quite a few that I'm interested in, although I'm not quite sure if I'm interested enough to pull the trigger. What seems to be happening over the past couple weeks is that I'll check out a campaign, see the price, and then my interest suddenly drops for some unknown reason. With campaigns getting more and more expensive, I think it's making me a lot more picky on the ones that I back. I have no idea how this trend is going to continue or if things will start to come back down once these supply chain issues get all ironed out. Historically, prices just seem to go up in all areas, and there's the saying that cash is trash, because if you're holding on to cash, it just devalues every year, and the next year you just have less money than you did before. Which is kind of weird because wages don't always go up, and if you're working for the same amount the following year, you're actually making less for being more experienced at your job. This economy is not sustainable. Maybe it's actually better to keep investing in board games because they do seem to hold their value and actually appreciate in some cases. This is going down a dangerous train of thought, so I'm just going to stop here. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.